There was once a kingdom that lived in constant fear under the rule of a tyrant dragon. Its eyes burned with hatred, and its scales were impenetrable. People could smell its stench from miles away, and no one could stand against its might. The priests were ineffective, magicians' curses failed, and warriors who dared to fight were turned to ash in moments. This beast demanded 10,000 lives daily, people randomly chosen, dragged to the mountain where the dragon lived to be devoured. The kingdom had no choice but to submit. Life, they accepted, was nothing more than a brief pause before becoming the dragon's meal. Generations grew up knowing their final moments would be spent in the dragon's maw. As the kingdom's population increased, so did the dragon's appetite. It became so colossal that the mountain on which it resided seemed small in comparison. Yet, despite the ever-growing hunger and the ever-growing number of deaths, the kingdom continued to function. The king, paralyzed by fear, spent more time organizing the logistics of delivering victims to the dragon than trying to stop it. Soon, an entire infrastructure developed around the dragon's demands. Clerks were hired to track those destined to die. People collectors were employed to gather the chosen ones, and comforters traveled with them to ease their final hours. Dragonologists, those who studied the beast, spent their time not looking for a way to kill it, but trying to make the process more efficient. Steam engines and railways were built to transport the doomed to their fate, and all the while, the dragon's reign continued unquestioned. But humanity, as resilient as it is curious, was never content with simply accepting fate. In the darkest corners of the kingdom, an idea began to form. What if, despite the dragon's seemingly invincible nature, there was a way to kill it? The idea started with one dragonologist who discovered a material sharp enough to pierce the dragon's scales. It would be no easy task, but perhaps, with the right weapon, humanity could free itself from its tormentor. As word spread, hope flickered where none had been before. The king, hesitant but intrigued, agreed to hold a hearing, a chance for the kingdom to decide if they should pursue this seemingly impossible task. In a grand hall, the advisors and dragonologists presented their arguments. The king's advisor for morality was the first to speak. He insisted that the dragon was a necessary evil, that it was part of the natural order. He even went so far as to say that being eaten was a blessing, a noble end to human life. Many listened in silence, accepting the words they had heard all their lives. But then, from the crowd, a voice rang out, a child's voice.
The dragon is bad.
The hall grew still. The child, undeterred by the silence, continued.
The dragon ate my granny. I want my granny back.
Suddenly, others stood.
The dragon killed my parents.
The dragon took my daughter.
Grief, long buried beneath resignation, surfaced in the people, and their voices joined together in one undeniable truth. The dragon was not necessary. The dragon was evil, and it had to be stopped. The king, moved by the passion of his people, declared,
"Let us kill the dragon."
And the people erupted in cheers. The kingdom mobilized like never before. People rallied, raising funds for the dragon-killing project. Technicians worked day and night to build the weapon that would pierce the dragon's armor. But as the years passed, doubt crept in. Would the project succeed? And more pressing, would it succeed in time? The dragon's hunger did not wait, and each day, more lives were lost. The project required solutions to 1,000 technical problems, each of which required dozens of time-consuming solutions. Test missiles were fired which failed horribly, and terrible accidents happened, but the people did not give up. The king's deadline was fast approaching, but in the years that passed, the dragon still lived, and still preyed on the people. After over a decade, the final days approached, and a prototype missile was prepared for launch. The test was successful, and the missile was set to launch on New Year's Eve, 12 years after the project began. The weapon was ready. As the sun set, technicians scuttled around, making final observations and checks. The king and his advisors watched from a distance, and the people gathered to watch the great event. A large clock counted down as they watched the dark silhouette of the dragon on the distant mountain. Suddenly, from the crowd, someone jumped the fence fighting against the security to meet the king, his nose bleeding. He pleaded.
The last train! Stop the last train!
The young man was a junior clerk in the Ministry of Transportation and had just discovered that his father was on that last train that still ferried people to their deaths. But the king had ordered that the train continue to the very end, fearing that any distraction might cause the dragon to stir and the missile to miss.
I cannot do it. If we alert the dragon too soon, the mission may fail. I am so sorry.
And so, as the countdown to the missile launch began, the young man watched, knowing his father would not live to see the dragon fall. 10, 9, 8. The kingdom held its breath. 5, 4, 3. The young man wept. 2, 1, 0. A fiery explosion illuminated the night sky as the missile soared toward the dragon. For a moment, all was silent. Then, with a deafening crash, the dragon, who had terrorized the kingdom for so long, collapsed. A collective cheer rose from the masses, their joy overwhelming the sorrow of so many lost lives. The king, drenched in sweat but glowing with triumph, addressed his people.
We are free.
He said, his voice filled with both relief and regret.
But let us not forget those we have lost. We must use this time, this new future, to build a better world. For now, we have time.
And so for the first time in centuries, the bells of the kingdom rang out in celebration, marking not the end, but a new beginning. The dragon was dead, but hope, at long last, was alive.